here with Adam Meckler, who is a trumpet player, composer, and educator living in Upper Peninsula, Michigan. There, he's the director of jazz studies at Michigan Tech. He leads the 18-piece Adam Meckler Orchestra, which is big band featuring his original music. He also tours very frequently with the Hornheads, the Youngblood Brass Band, and, of course, Nookie Jones. Mm-hmm. Adam, thanks so much for sitting down to chat today. I know you're a super busy dude.
Yeah, man. I'm glad it worked out.
Is that Adam Meckler Orchestra poster behind you?
It is.
Is that you?
That is me. That is supposed to be me. I commissioned that. This guy Dave Chisholm is a trumpet player and big band arranger in New York City, and he is also a graphic novelist, and is about to release a graphic novel called Chasing the Bird. And it's about Charlie Parker's time in LA. And he's getting tons of press, and I'm trying to remember who did the forward. Somebody huge, Chris Potter, I think, did it forward or reviewed it. So he's getting like all these huge jazz names are doing the forward for it and reviewing it. And he's like super brilliant. This is another one that he did.
Dude, that's sweet, super right? Cool.
And then he did one, a monk one too, that I bought a print of. And he was just doing this to like make extra money, and we were emailing about it, and he was like, "Man, I can't believe it. It's like life takes such weird turns. It's like I never thought I'd be making money inking things, and now he's doing like all this original art and comic books. He did another comic book called Instrumental that was about a trumpet player's life, and he recorded a whole bunch of music that goes with the graphic novel, and that was like his first big thing. And then now he's doing this Charlie Parker thing, which I'm going to buy. I think I'm going to get a whole bunch of them for my students here at Tech too. We actually have a lot in common. We play, he plays multiple instruments and does other things other than music. I don't necessarily do other things other than music, but I do a lot of things within music that are not just trumpet playing. Moving to the UP was such a trip because obviously we came from Minneapolis, and we were in a relatively populated area of Minneapolis, and we were walked a lot of places, but we needed both of our cars, and I literally haven't driven my car since we got here. It's like made it up here, and then I just walk to work, and if I want to walk downtown, I can walk downtown. We have an acre of land, like close to towns, which is pretty rare. We have this big wooded lot. And we built this big horseshoe path through the lot that people can we hoping that neighbors would just find it and walk through our yard, because it's this beautiful yard. We're on a hill. So we're going to sell my car, because why do we even need it? We don't, I guess. And I walk to work today, so it's really, it's nice. In the wintertime, awesome. It becomes slightly more difficult because we get like 400 inches of snow a year up here. An outrageous amount of snow like you've never imagined. Coming from Minneapolis, it's more cold than snow compared to up here. The temperature's more moderate, but man, we'll get, it'll be like day after day after day after day, like 12 inches, 15 inches, 7 inches, 22 inches, 7 inches. It's like every single day you're out using the Uper scooper. There's this thing called a Uper scooper that I never knew what it was. And it's this thing where you just push the snow and you create like a ramp, and then you push the snow off of the ramp, and the ramp just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm hearing my son in my head, because he always goes, "I'm growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger." The ramp just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and this was all mining. It was like copper mining and stuff up here. So this was like known for being a mining area, which is why Michigan Tech was founded. It was founded to like train miners, and eventually became, a technological school where they train engineers, things like that. And there's still forestry and really cool outdoors kinds of programs here, because the landscape is really unbelievable. But you really have to think like a miner during winter. You have to think like, where am I going to put this snow long term? Where is this snow going to go? Because there's so much, you have to manage it. And actually in my orientation, they were like, "Hey, so we need you to be thinking about where you're going to put your snow," because they've had faculty quit because of how bad the winters are. And not bad, but it's like you have to embrace it. You have to be like, all right, we're going to have lots of snow, and it's going to be fun. And it's fun for my kids, so I can get over myself and enjoy it. You know what I mean? It's wild, man. It's great. We did the move, and it took some getting used to. Certainly, we're still getting used to it. And it was my first year as a tenure track professor at a university. I've worked adjunct jobs elsewhere, but this was really like my first big position, and it was very weird to have halfway through the year be like, okay, figure out what you're going to do with your students remotely, So we did a whole bunch of remote stuff last year that was really cool. We did a collaboration with a bunch of dancers from SUNY Brockport, where a buddy of mine teaches a music for dance class. So my music students wrote music for these dancers, and the dancers did choreography, and they exchanged stuff, and then they each did their own discipline on the other person's video. And we created a whole bunch of videos, and then did a Facebook live stream concert where we presented all these remote videos that we recorded. So we ended up doing a lot of really cool projects, and actually, like, being a full-time musician in Minneapolis really helped, I think, prepare me for the nature of the like unknown and the improvisation of having to be like, okay, whoa, all our plans are gone, and now what do we do during a pandemic? It's like we're used to being gritty, getting down to the nitty gritty, and figuring out how to make things work as full-time musicians.
It sounds like you are re-entering the classroom this fall, though. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm doing everything in person, and we've had our family has had our little isolation bubble since the pandemic started, and we've had a couple of families where we've hung out with around bonfires and stuff, and let our kids play with their kids, because they're a family that's sort of functioning the same way that we are, only doing grocery pickups and whatever, not going in a whole lot of stores. But there's a mask mandate in Michigan, so that helps. Everybody's wearing masks indoors, and it helps you feel a little more secure about going places, certainly. And at Michigan Tech, obviously the mask mandate stands for indoors, but there's also like a whole bunch of distancing protocols, and they're testing 120 random students a day, and they're testing the sewage every day from the dorms, and they're doing loads and loads of testing. They're one of the more rigorous testing universities in the United States, actually. So I'm super curious to see how it works out. We're doing, instead of doing full big bands, we're doing Miles Davis' Birth of the Cool album in my top ensemble. So we're doing nonettes, and Benny Golson wrote all this music for Dizzy Gillespie in 1957 for Octet, in this really subdued, I think it's called The Greatest Trumpet of All Time or something like that, the record, or The Greatest Trumpet Ever, maybe. But he arranged all this music for Octet, for Dizzy, and Gigi Grice too. So half the record is Gigi Grice arrangements, and half the record is Benny Golson arrangements. And those, we're going to play those as well. We're going to do some hard bop stuff. I wrote some like 4 trumpet plus bass funk etudes, and I wrote a couple brass band tunes over the summer, and one of my students wrote a brass band tune. So we're basically like, we're going to do all of Birth of the Cool, the entire album, and I'm going to flip the horn section over halfway through the album, so every horn player in the top band, in our lab band, gets to participate. And I have to get a little creative because we've got tenor saxes. There's no tenor sax on the record, and I've got 2 great tenor saxophone students that I want to feature. And but we've got all these other things too. A brass band that's going to meet like Fridays during the same time. So we're like splitting it up and creating different ensembles. And the theme of the concert in October, assuming that we're still meeting in person by then, is jazz in new formations. So just like smaller sized and different sized groups. Our theme was going to be jazz meets hip hop, and we were going to play big band arrangements of jazz that's been sampled in hip hop tunes, and then do the hip hop version with an MC, and back to back, which is an idea I've had for a long time, that I actually pitched to the Jasmine Orchestra when they were interviewing me for the position. And of course I was a finalist for the gig and didn't get the gig, which is why I'm here. But that was one of my ideas then, and it's something that I've really wanted to implement. So we're going to do that hopefully in the fall next year. But yeah, we had to cancel guest artists and all kinds of stuff last year. We got Caroline Davis coming in this year, amazing alto player in New York City. Just did a great record with Rob Clearfield. She's going to be our guest artist in the spring. Yeah, man, it's kind of a wild landscape right now, but my students are all coming masked and ready to rock. We're using bell covers too. I got these bell covers that say Michigan Tech Jazz on them. So we're like branded. This really extensive study that was done, University of Colorado and a whole bunch of other participating researchers, and they essentially researched aerosol levels and singing aerosol levels and playing wind instruments. And their research was incredibly thorough. They just released a second round of results, and their essentially their takeaways are a combination of slit masks so that droplets around the corners of the embouchure get caught while you're playing, and bell covers greatly reduces the amount of aerosols in the room. And in my mind, that combined with doing somewhat smaller ensembles, 8, 9, 10 piece ensembles, hopefully will keep me and my colleagues and my students safe from getting sick. But universities all over the United States are closing after the first week of school. I mean, people are freaking out because there are these massive outbreaks. But Michigan Tech is an engineering school, and these are students that generally, they party like every other university, of course, but they work very hard, and they follow rules generally. And I think that I see students all over campus wearing masks. I think people are generally embracing the idea of as long as we adhere to certain things, we can continue to take classes in person, or at least some of our classes in person, especially labs, because a lot of my students are materials engineers and mechanical engineers, and they have to do labs. They have to figure out how to build parts for machines and things like that. So, last semester, I know a lot of my students said that their professors had them doing projects on their home ovens and microwaves and things like that to try and replicate some of the experiments they would do in the lab. But there's only so much of that you can do, and that was one of the reasons why Michigan Tech, I think, pushed us to provide some in-person instruction this year. And of course, we have to do a daily symptom monitoring form every day before we go in, there's the random testing like I told you about, and I can get a couple tests for myself if I want for no cost. So I'm actually coming to Minneapolis in a couple weeks. It's weird to go from 0 to 100. I'm coming to Minneapolis to do a performance with the Hornheads and Dave Koz and Corey Wong at Crooners, 2 shows at Crooners, and then 2 days in the studio, Tuesday, Wednesday that week. So my isolation bubble is firmly bursting into pieces, and so I'll get a test when I come back from that. But of course, everything's masked, and the studio session is part of it's going to be on film. So everyone that's not on film is going to be masked. But once you're on film, masks are off and you're playing. Gotcha. So, and it's at Creation in Minneapolis, which is a big space, a really big studio space. But yeah, it's weird to go from not seeing anyone and feeling a real deep sense of longing to like see people and connect and play music again. And then just to go to 1,000% and play with Corey and Dave Koz and the Hornets. But I'm very much looking forward to that.
That's awesome. Yeah. And the Crooners thing, of course, is outdoors at the moment.
Yeah, outdoors. Right. Yeah. And the audience is distanced. They're at their own tables. And it seems to, you're around there. I don't know if have you been to any of those shows yet?
I haven't been to, I've seen a couple of them, live streamed or like doing the drive-through kind of concert. Yeah, but I haven't been to one in person yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems to be working, and it seems like they're not getting a whole lot of issues of spreading the virus. Yeah, I'm an optimistic person, and I feel like, hey, if people follow rules and wear masks and don't come in when they're feeling a little bit sick, maybe we can stay open all semester. But there's a whole bunch of evidence to show that that's maybe not going to happen. I don't know. It's everybody wants it to be over, but it's probably not going to be over. We learned about the Spanish flu in 1918 and how like this time was like the big second wave that was bigger than the first. It was like worse the second time that it went through. Yep. But who knows if that's the case now or not?
Right. But it's just it is interesting to kind of look back on that pandemic and see some of the same things going on societally. Like people, it sounded like people were very patriotic and most of the time pretty uniform about wearing masks, but there was the same debate.
Same debate.
Yeah.
Totally. I found it's like I found a newspaper article from that time. Somebody posted it that was like, don't discredit people that are experts at something. Listen to experts, and it says, keep your distance, wash your hands, all this stuff. The general hygiene things that probably have gotten better since that time, right? And becoming more aware of. That makes me wonder, like, how is this going to affect how all of us act around each other? How often we wash our hands? How often we're carrying around sanitizer or whatever? It's like, how long is that going to last? I don't know. Maybe forever.
And the listen to experts thing is interesting.
Well, there's been an attack on intellectualism for a long time, right? There's been an attack on people that are experts at things. So you're elitist because you have an education. And I can see how there are access issues with education, absolutely 100%. But elitism, I don't know. Being an expert at something is valuable, and we need experts at things. Right. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, but we need experts, and we need to listen to the experts. It's like me. Like, I'm a jazz improviser. I was just teaching jazz theory and oral skills, a new class that I introduced this year to Michigan Tech, and that's my bag. And if my students come in and they're like, every time I say something, I don't know, Meckler. I don't know. I don't know. Like, dude, you don't know anything. I'm the one who knows this stuff, and that's why I'm here teaching you this stuff. And of course, my students would never do that. They're super excited to take my class and absorb this information. But it's the same idea. It's like, if there's somebody that really knows what they're talking about and they're an expert in the field, it's like we should be listening to the majority of the experts. But whatever. We don't have to talk about this the whole time. But it's such a big thing. And of course, there's, we have all kinds of protests going on right now again after the Kenosha shooting.
Yep.
Jacob Blake. And man, that's close to where I grew up. I grew up in Illinois, northern Illinois. I used to go to the Guitar Center in Kenosha all the time to buy my guitars and my guitar amps and stuff. And man, yeah, it's what a mess. What a mess.
Really scary,
Yeah, I mean, whatever. It doesn't matter what I think. What a mess.
Well,
a lot of reform is needed on the police side,
Yeah, just last night we had, everybody got an alert on their phones at like 10 p.m. saying there's a curfew and they've brought in the National Guard again to contain whatever was happening in downtown Minneapolis.
How about instead of sending people with riot gear, you listen to the protesters and start to make some changes at the federal level? Maybe some laws need to get passed. I mean, when they crossed the bridge in Alabama in the 60s, Lyndon B. Johnson signed a bill shortly after that big brawl. And I'm sure that the conversation in the United States was, these people, these thugs are disturbing the peace and yada, yada, yada. And of course, out of that came some really important legislation. And I think it's important to remember that that's how, this is how things get done. Protesting works. And there's a lot of anti-protesting. And it's like, hey, if you want it to stop, you got to listen to what the message is and make some changes. Make some really trackable changes. And people have to speak up. People that are on the sidelines need to speak up.
We seem to be kind of living in this moment of a weird historical amnesia or something. Like moderates, let's say, will say things about, Martin Luther King would have done it this way, or he preached this about nonviolent protesting, and it's like,
yeah, it's like, well, he also said violence is the language of the unheard. So there's a lot of things that Martin Luther King said, and we can take any of it out of context.
Right, a lot of cherry picking.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. And you also hear a lot of like, I support the message, but this is not the way to go about it. There's a lot of armchair, this is not the way to go about it. And it's like, okay, the entire world is talking about it. So it seems like it is the way to go about it. It seems like this was the way to bring attention to the issue. This is it. If Colin Kaepernick kneels, this is not the way. This is the wrong way to do it. We protest in the streets. This is the wrong way to do it. Somebody airs out a conversation that they had privately with someone and puts it on Facebook, which happened recently in Minneapolis. That's not the way to do it, right? And it's like, hey, I looked at that post. There's 850 comments on that post. You know,
Mm-hmm.
everyone in Minneapolis was contributing to that conversation. Was that a bad thing that he aired out a private conversation? Maybe etiquette-wise, maybe. But you can't sit there and say it was the wrong way when everyone in town is now talking about it. You know,
Right.
Which is an important conversation that everybody needs to have and confront. And we need to be reflecting on ourselves and our own racist tendencies as white people that are deeply ingrained in society, deeply ingrained in us, without even knowing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so part of that is just the awareness and the work, putting in the work on yourself. And it's hard. It's hard to hear that the first time as a white person. I get why people get defensive, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you allow yourself to stop and reflect, you can see that, you know, this has been going on 400 years, 500 years. And you know, relatively speaking, this is, you know, the civil rights movement was, you know, 50, 60 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
This is like, people were alive during that time. People that are alive today were alive during that time. It's not like it's ancient history, which a lot of people are saying.
Mm-hmm.
And being the director of jazz studies at a university, I mean, you know, this is Black music, and there's a whole conversation about whether we should rename jazz Black American music or some other acronym, Black improvised music. I want to be in that conversation, listening and trying to understand, and then adjusting how I teach and how I present my material and what material I present that can better reflect and better honor the Black men and women who were pioneers of this music, who were all essentially the greatest innovators of the music, and still today. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there's a lot of responsibility, I think, that white jazz musicians and jazz directors have to understand the narrative and to start to try and be a part of the solution rather than a part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. You had a very interesting project back in late May, I think, that I wanted to ask you about, which was, it sounded like a kind of a concert's worth of protest songs and protest music arranged for big band, and it was specifically aimed at jazz educators.
Yeah. So we did a concert. It was actually last October. We did a concert called Jazz as Protest. That was the first concert that I did here at Michigan Tech. So everybody knew who I was right away, which is dangerous. But the chair of my department was extremely supportive, and he did get some pushback. He got some messages from people, faculty even, that were frustrated with the theme of the concert. Of course, since then, this conversation is completely blown up because since then, George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. But this is something that's been on my mind a long time. You know, I collaborated with Harjinder and Toki Wright on my last album, and Cameron Kinghorn. And you know, when I sent the music to Toki, I said, I want you to speak about the experience of a Black man in America. I want it to be edgy and political. I want you to speak your mind, right? I want to give you a platform. I want to use my platform to amplify your voice. And that's part of the deal with collaborating too, is letting go and going, here's a cool thing that I came up with now. What can you do with it? Right. Mm-hmm. And Toki did some really brilliant work. Cameron did some really brilliant work. Harjinder did some really brilliant work. JD Steele. It's really, you know, both of those songs could be considered protest songs. And so in my mind, I'm thinking all along, like, I want to explore this a little bit more. And I started researching protest music and jazz. And of course, there's boatloads of it, both from today and from the past. And so I focused on stuff from the past. And I'm going to slowly work my way up, and I'm going to continue to do these arrangements, or at least I'm planning to. But I arranged Sonny Rollins' Freedom Suite, the first movement for big band. Yeah, it's a boo be de do boo be de boo de de do de de go, right? So great. It's just a little trio tune. Arranged it for big band. So that was really fun. And we, you know, he said some really poignant words about Black culture in America, and this was like 1958. This was before the Civil Rights Movement that he did this record, and they actually wanted to call it something else he wanted to call it the Freedom Suite. He wanted to call the album the Freedom Suite, and they called it something else. I don't even remember what it was. Waltz or something. I don't remember what, some waltz tune. I think they named the record. But he wrote some really poignant words on the back of that album, and so we learned a lot as a class, as a big band. You know, we learned about these tunes. We did Fables of Faubus, of course. Mm-hmm. We did a Dave Douglas tune called "The Presidents" that he wrote during the 2008 presidential election, where Barack Obama was elected. And we did Max Roach's "Freedom Day," which was from his "Freedom Now" suite record, and tons of amazing music on that record that's protest oriented. Freedom Day was about the feeling that surrounded emancipation, the disbelief, and you know, there's a lot. It's sort of rife with angst and energy. It's very fast, and there's a lot of like fast swing that's not necessarily in time with the rest of the band. A lot of drum improv. Max Roach, right? A lot of improvisations on the drums. And then we did my tune, "Open Your Eyes," that I wrote after Trayvon Martin was shot, by George Zimmerman in Florida. And for those of you that don't remember, Trayvon was staying with his dad's fiance in a gated community, and was walking to the store to buy some Skittles and walked home and was followed by this guy George Zimmerman. And Zimmerman essentially started conflict and also ended it, and could have just left him alone. And he called the police and said, "I'm following this guy. He looks suspicious." And the police said, "Don't do that. Leave him alone." You know, and he still followed him. And then, of course, Zimmerman was acquitted of all charges. And that's the story. That's the story we continue to hear over and over and over and over again. Acquitted, acquitted, acquitted. Self-defense, self-defense, self-defense. It just needs to end. Somebody needs to be held accountable for killing people. For killing black men and women. There's too many. Elijah McClain, a violinist who went and played for animals, you know, in his free time. Breonna Taylor, who was an EMT, just sitting in her home. Police broke into her house. Not a criminal. Elijah McClain is not a criminal. Just an eccentric artist, you know. It's pretty screwed up, dude. It's pretty screwed up. And it's really hard to believe that people can't see it. It's hard to see people denying it over and over and over again when it's so public and so visible. But anyways, I arranged all this music for big band, and we created a slideshow that featured photos of the events that inspired the works, in addition to photos of like the artists that created the works, things like that. And then we had a narrator speak about each work in between the work. So it's a program that's literally like spotlight on narrator speaks, there's a slideshow going behind the band, narrator finishes, band plays a song, spotlight on narrator, speaks about the next song, slideshow going while this narrator speaking, play the next song. I arranged America the Beautiful in this really dark and dissonant way too, for that concert. So I actually did just finish editing all of those, and I'm going to send them out to all the band directors who, I hadn't edited them. I wrote them so fast. I arranged them so fast in the fall to get ready for the October concert that I didn't have time to like make them look pretty. So I made them look pretty now this last week, and I'm going to send them out to all the band directors that asked for them. So if you're a band director watching this and you're like, where's my protest music package? What we're doing is I am asking people simply to donate to the NAACP or Black Lives Matter Minneapolis or Minnesota. And then I'll send the package to them of all the music. So that's kind of the deal. If people want to buy the charts, I'll donate the money to the NAACP. So, you know, it's like how you start to wonder, like, how can I help? What can I do to help? You know, and that was one of the things that I came up with. So I'm going to continue to arrange this stuff for big band. There's a great tune called KKPD that Christian Scott wrote on one of his records a while ago, and he got a lot of flack for that song. But it was about an incident where he was coming home from a gig in New Orleans and was pulled over by the cops, and they had him on the ground with gun to his head, knees in his back. I mean, this is a law-abiding, world-class jazz musician from New Orleans, and just because he's a black man, you know, is ripped out of his car and thrown on the ground. I've been asked to sit in the passenger seat of police cars. I've been asked to get out of my car. I've never been accosted, really. I've never been touched by a police officer. I mean, it's like, the obvious difference is that I'm white. And
Right.
yeah, again, it's like it's so hard to watch everybody deny that this is a thing that's happening. Um, of course, black people are used to that, but you know, a lot of black people are like, I'm not surprised.
Right.
You know, are you surprised? I'm not surprised. This has been going on forever.
You know, the suite of material that you've arranged, and with the narrations and slideshow and everything, like that's such a beautiful way to use, you know, your musical practice in a very concrete way to benefit the discussion about it, and then just funding organizations that are furthering the cause too.
I think it is our job to connect what we're doing as instrumental musicians that don't write lyrics all the time, to connect what we're doing to progress. And I don't know, it probably looks different for everyone. I mean, I think everyone has their own niche and their own way that they can make a difference, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be the one holding a megaphone at a protest or something. You know, it's like you can be in your own little circles, having conversations with your family members, whatever it is, small or big. It's like those little things. A lot of little things lead up to big movements. So I think wherever you are, whoever is listening, wherever you are, and whatever your influence is, it's like use that for good. And for us as instrumental musicians, for me, that means trying to collaborate and lift up people of color and voices of color, trying to hire people of color and voices of color and women to help to literally help fund their lives. Like I'm now in a position where I can bring in guest artists to my school. I can have people come and like talk to my classes. I can buy music that people have written. So I have like a tangible monetary way of contributing to people that I admire as artists because I have a budget here. Mm-hmm. And so I think being proactive about seeking out those voices in collaboration in your own music or whatever, to come and work with your students, it's like that's the kind of work that educators can be doing that aren't necessarily, you know, educators are often drowning in their own busyness, you know, mm-hmm. Because of how much work these kinds of jobs are. And I'm lucky. My job is a lot of work to start, but then once we get rolling, it's I'm used to leading bands, and that's like what I do. So mm-hmm. directing a bunch of bands is like, it's fun for me. And I'm teaching a lot of music by ear. So, you know, some music I'm not even printing out. I'm just going there and going, this is your part, this is your part, this is your part, especially the brass band stuff. But yeah, educators can use their budgets to bring in great artists of color and women, you know, instead of bringing in me every year, which I love and appreciate. And I want to do guest artist gigs. But every guest artist gig I do, I'm recommending other people of color and women, because they're just so underrepresented in the jazz community. You know, L.A. Buckner and I did a festival together in Augustana in South Dakota. And, you know, we had a conversation where he was like, it's just such a trip to be here and see like no other black faces at a jazz festival, at a festival that's black music, to essentially see nobody that looks like him. Mm-hmm. You know, and you know, he even was saying like, you know, students look at him a certain way, and it's like, it's a tough, like it must be it's like there's no way for us to really understand and imagine it. But I've admired LA for a really long time. He was my student at McNally Smith, weirdly. And by student, I mean like I was like, here's music to play, and then I sat back and went, okay, cool, wow, that sounds amazing. You know, a lot of being an educator when you're dealing with really advanced students is to let them figure out how to rehearse, right, and then step in when it's needed. And so that's a lot of what I did with my McNally Smith ensemble that LA played drums in, and Ethan Yeshaya played bass, and JC Pajuelo on keyboards, and Ethan Elsith on guitar, Lucia Sarmiento, Cody LeDuc, Hayden Fee. I mean, it was a killing band of students that are basically all pros now. And so as an educator, you're like, sometimes you want to control every little thing, and other times you have to kind of step back and let them figure it out.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because LA very recently put out a wonderful solo album. I mean, I first heard about him on I forget what the show is called exactly, but it's a PBS...
Soundfield.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just a wonderful look into different musical concepts and ways of thinking about music. It was a great show on
yeah,
YouTube. But and I was like,
really
oh
a
wait,
great YouTube
he lives in
series.
Minneapolis. Oh wait, he used to be in Adam Eckler's class. What?
Yeah, yeah, he's really an amazing human. I mean, truly, I can't say enough about it. When we went to Chicago on tour, and the students had an opportunity to speak and sort of like talk about their experience at McNally Smith and talk about music and teach a little bit. Uh, a lot of my students were great teachers. LA was like so articulate and energetic and charismatic, and just really, the students were really drawn towards him. And I knew then, I was like, man, this guy is really something special as a musician, of course, but as a human, I think too. And so part of my job as having been his instructor is to do what my instructors did for me, right? Is to go, hey, you need to hire this guy. Look at this guy over here. You need to hire him. And of course, now he had a number one. His jazz album was number one on the iTunes charts for a couple of days, which is going to bring him much deserved notoriety, I hope, and open many doors. But same thing with Lucia, and seeing her really start to come into her own as an artist, and as like an influencer on Instagram. And she also teaches my son Spanish lessons once a week. We that's part of us. Like, can I pay you some money to do something? Trying to support my former students who I really admire and want to succeed. And now we're in this weird pandemic where nobody has any money and nobody's working, and especially musicians that are full-time musicians are having a lot of trouble making ends meet. And so, yeah, it's like, how can I be, now that I'm in a position, I can't imagine where I'd be if I was still in Minneapolis. I mean, we probably would have sold our house and moved in with my in-laws. But now I'm in this position where I have a salary and I have a budget to help and receive this and give my students here this really valuable information from these amazing artists.
Not a place that you certainly anticipated being in, moving away from all your projects in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Dude. Nookie Jones and Youngblood and everything.
Yeah, well, Youngblood is one of those things where, like, that band's been going on 20 years. Everyone in the band lives all over the world. There's a guy that lives in Switzerland, and the sound engineer lives in Great Britain, and a few guys live in Madison. Guy lives in Nashville, Colorado, Chicago. We're all over the United States. So that band is essentially wherever you live, you fly in, you rehearse for a couple of days, and then you go on tour. So I'm still in Youngblood, and still arranging some of their brass band tunes for big bands. If you're looking for brass band or big band arrangements of brass band tunes of Youngblood tunes, my arrangement of WrestleVania is now available on their website. I'm doing A La A next, and Brooklyn is up there. That was done by Nat McIntosh. He did that big band arrangement, and he also wrote that tune. But there's some big band versions of Youngblood tunes available. But yeah, that's one of those bands that, like, wherever you live, you can just fly to where the rehearsal is. And a lot of times that's in Europe. It's like you fly over to Europe, everybody meets over there, and then rehearses for a couple days in Maastricht, Holland, and then jump in the bus and go. And then we live on a double-decker tour bus for months at a time. And now, of course, I haven't done a tour like that in a little while because I had small kids, and was another great trumpet player named Mike Jones was touring for me instead of me, and Adam Rappa did a tour as well. And then I came back and did one, and then there was one that Mike did, and then the pandemic. So it's now that my kids, hopefully, as they're getting older, I'll be able to go back out for longer periods of time. But I started to cut back a little on the extensive touring near the end of my time in Minneapolis. But yeah, and then Nookie Jones on a slight hiatus, obviously, because of the pandemic and other things. And Cameron's chasing another lead singer. Cameron Kinghorn is in this great band called King Perry, and he's chasing the dream with King Perry, doing really amazing stuff. My orchestra, Adam Meckler Orchestra, I formed an Adam Meckler Orchestra in Chicago as well. And we did a show with that band in January before the pandemic started, as a part of my January tour with my students here at Michigan Tech. Actually, my top band did a whole tour of Chicago, and we played a club show. And at the club show, my Michigan Tech band opened for the Adam Meckler Orchestra Chicago version, using all Chicago pros. So the idea was to create satellite bands in every city since I live in the UP, it doesn't matter. It's like I'll come to Minneapolis, play with my Minneapolis band, go to Chicago, play with my Chicago band, form a band in New York City, and do that as well, which I didn't have a chance to do, but I'm planning on doing. So yeah, man, that's trying to keep the energy rolling and keep the releases happening and keep my own music, keep releasing my own music and recording my own music and doing all that. That's really where I always viewed myself as a performer, a touring artist first. I didn't even think I would be an educator, honestly. When I graduated, I was like, I'm only going to tour. That's all I'm going to do. And life takes turns you don't expect. And I found that I really love teaching, and I'm very energized by it. I'm talking so much probably because I just taught my my jazz theory and all skills class, and I was super pumped. It was the first class of the year, and I was like, yes, I'm giving my stuff in my head to you. This is so much fun.
Was this in person?
In person, yeah.
Oh,
well, I have
awesome.
2 students taking it remotely, so I'm putting all the materials on Canvas, which is like Moodle or Blackboard or whatever. I'm putting all my materials on Canvas, and so I'm literally sitting here with my, I'm sitting here with my keyboard, and I'm like recording myself talking and playing keyboard, doing the ear training stuff. And uploading all that to Canvas and creating worksheets in Finale, and I'm designing the class. It's a class that I took, Jazz Theory and All Skills, I took at Lawrence with Fred Sturm. And there was no text or anything. Fred just did everything. He just did everything by ear, just did everything because Fred was totally brilliant. And I have my notes from that class, but I have nothing else. And so I'm essentially designing this class based on my memory of his class, and then incorporating all the things that I've done as an educator over the last 10 years. And maybe someday we'll make a book out of it or something, or some kind of digital class that can be done on YouTube, maybe. I don't know.
The position that you have now, did you inherit that, or are you like creating it as you go?
No, I inherited it. Actually, I'm super lucky. This is one of the last positions in the United States that's a tenure track jazz position that you don't need a doctorate to have. I do not have a doctorate. I did 10 years as a full-time player, right? But and I have a master's degree, but I don't have a doctorate. And so the 10 years in the field, that was my doctorate. And they're here at Michigan Tech, they are willing to acknowledge that, which is really cool. So I got very lucky. There was a guy here named Mike Irish, a great guitar player actually, who was here for I think 27 years. And he was also a student here. He was like a forestry major, and then went and got a master's in jazz studies, and then taught at Stevens Point for a while in the jazz department. And he knew Fred Sturm well, actually, in the 70s. And then he got the gig up here and totally loved it and stayed here forever. The guy before him was Don Karanen, who founded the program in the 50s and essentially was the jazz director for 20-some years. He used to bring the band to Jamaica every year. There's actually a festival in Jamaica that's named after the school here because he brought the band every single year for a long time. And so there's a great legacy of jazz here at Michigan Tech that I'm really happy to be a part of. And because there have only been 2 jazz directors before me, the program is super strong and solid. There's loads of support. There's tons of alumni donations every year. So I actually have like a real budget that I can hire guest artists with, and I can buy charts, and I can, buy masks and bell covers if I have to. These are things that are thanks to Mike Irish and Don Karanen for sure.
On a personal note, any projects that you're working on at the moment, or music that you're composing or arranging that we didn't get to talk about?
Yeah, so I've got a record coming out in September, a live album with the Adam Meckler Orchestra. So we did our big album release party last April, or in April before last now, April 2019. And we recorded the whole show. We close mic'd everything and recorded the whole show. We had a 4-piece choir, and we had Harjinder flew in from Jamaica for the show, and Toki Wright flew in from Boston for the show. It was all done at the Parkway Theater. There's a couple videos that were done, but mostly it was just recorded. So we're releasing a Adam Meckler Orchestra Live in Minneapolis album September 18th on Rope-A-Dope Records. And Rope-A-Dope Sur, the southern portion of Rope-A-Dope that releases a lot of stuff in Mexico. It's run by Todd Clauser, an old buddy of mine that I used to tour with. So Todd was sort of my connection to Rope-A-Dope. He's the reason I sort of got into that family. But I'm dealing with the Rope-A-Dope folks. They're the ones helping me promote it and get it up on playlists on Spotify and release them online and all that stuff. But yeah, man, that's coming out September 18th. I also have been recording and writing and recording and playing all the instruments on a whole bunch of home recorded songs that I am singing as well, and like writing lyrics and things like that. So when I was in high school, I was in like a rock band, played guitar and wrote songs and sang lead singer and stuff, So it's like part of me, when you become a jazz musician, a lot of times you're told to not listen to anything but jazz music. Like it's going to be toxic if you don't listen to anything but jazz music. And certainly early on when you're learning a language, maybe that's the case. When you're really trying to learn how to feel the music and swing, it's like you have to be absorbing it all the time, which means listening to the greats and, and imitating, and then hopefully eventually sounding somewhat like yourself. But part of my history as an artist is also that I started playing guitar when I was 8, and I always wrote songs all through high school, and I wrote a lot of poetry, and I sang in choirs all the way through high school, and I did musicals where I was on stage acting, and I've always sang backup vocals in my wife's band, Jan and Iber group, and so for me, it almost feels like, and I play bass and piano and drums, so it almost feels like a more authentic version of myself to be writing these songs and then playing all the instruments. And so I'll be released. I've done a few videos where they're just like, just my face is floating around in the video singing and playing instruments. And I'll do another one. I've got a new one called Sunshine is out. That LA is playing drums on, and great alto saxophonist from Chicago, Lenny Aisha McKinney, is going to play an alto solo on it. So I've got a couple guest artists that I'm going to filter in, and then eventually this will become like an album of totally different kinds of material that people aren't used to hearing from me, which I'm super excited about, and I'm sure people are going to be like, "What is he doing?" But I really love it, and it's really bringing me a lot of fulfillment, especially during the pandemic, to be able to go into my office and just write music and record it all and mix it all. Part of that game has been like learning how to use Pro Tools over the last 5 years, and I really started to dedicate myself to learning how to use DAWs and learning how to edit video when my first son was born, when Augie was born about 5 years ago, which was the worst time to learn new tech. FYI to everybody trying to learn a DAW, don't wait until you have kids, do it now. So I keep telling all my young students, and this is a conversation that's been going on too on the internet. A lot of people are like, you shouldn't have to learn how to do those things. You should just be able to play your instrument. Back when I was a kid, all we had to worry about was being good at your instrument. And it's like, well, the landscape's different now. It just is. And if you want to die a miserable death, then continue doing what you're doing, because it's not working, right? I don't speak to everybody, obviously, but there's a lot of people that are really digging their heels in the ground, and it's like, hey, if you want to be able to function in this new music economy, if you want to be able to find a way to make money in the new music economy, you have to be recording yourself. You have to be learning how to mix and master, at least taking some of the expense steps out of making a record. So for me, that was like, I was doing all these albums. I was raising all this money via Kickstarter, which was great. We did that like 5 times for 2 of my big band records and 2 of Jana's records. So 4 times, I guess. I didn't want to have to chase people for money. I didn't want to have to put things on credit cards anymore. It's like, I want to be able to record some of this myself. I know I can play all these instruments at a relatively decent level, at a passable level for some of them. And then the expense for me, like with this new song, hiring LA and hiring Lenny Aisha McKinney, it's like the difference of me spending thousands and thousands of dollars to record an album and pay a bunch of musicians versus like me recording everything, mixing everything, and then like spending some hundreds of dollars hiring a couple musicians to be features, but then also maybe spending $400, $500, $600 getting it mastered by somebody, and then doing everything else myself. I mean, we're cutting out many thousands of dollars doing that. And we know like people that are really successful pop artists like Billie Eilish, it's like they're doing all that stuff in their apartment. Jacob Collier is another, on the more jazz side, who's just doing everything in their apartment. And then as they become more successful, they're able to outsource a lot of that work and go like, actually, I'm going to have this guy do the video or this gal do the video, rather than me having to spend my time on that. So it's like part of it is like learning those skills, being able to do it, but then becoming successful enough at it that you can then start to delegate. But I think that's we could talk about, that's a whole nother conversation we could have, the new music economy and how to function in it. And of course I'm here at Michigan Tech, so what do I know? I'm no longer a full-time player, but we're about to, Jan and I are about to release a new app as well, called Gig Boss. That is essentially like a group creator, a gig creator, and if you create your group, you create your gig. Everybody in your group gets an email with the details of the gig. They can reply, accept or decline via email or in the app. You have a feed with all your gigs in it, and eventually it'll track. It'll track how much you've been paid, how much you've paid other people. You'll be able to pay people through the app. There's a whole bunch of things that you'll be able to do eventually. But just getting it to this point on iOS and Android has taken like 4 years. So we're now finally ready to release it, and it'll come out soon, and hopefully I can sell it for $1 bajillion in like 5 or 6 years. We'll see.
That's super exciting.
But we're gonna make it. We really want to make it something that's valuable. This was born out of 10 years in Minneapolis trying to organize my career as both a freelance musician and a band leader, which a lot of people like yourself function that way, where you're a side player who plays on a whole bunch of other people's projects, but you also have your own projects that you're doing, you're hiring other musicians for. Being able to organize all that in one place was the idea behind Gig Boss. So that'll be out iOS and Android. It was August 1st was supposed to be the launch date, honestly. So we keep running into little things, but we're very close. So we're gonna release very soon.
That's super exciting. Where is there a website just for that app, or like where do people go to find out when it's released? Yeah,
you can go to gigbossapp.com, gigbossapp.com, and facebook.com/gigboss. I believe it's Gig Boss app. There's also an Instagram page. So we're hiring someone to be our marketing person right now, because we raised a whole bunch of money to do this company. We sold percentages of the company to raise money. So we did it just like Shark Tank and whatever, but we did it kind of the old-fashioned way, where we called people and we met with people, and by we I mean me. And we've raised almost $50,000, and we're gonna keep raising money. As soon as the app is released and we have people using it and we get a little feedback, I'm gonna go back to investors and ask for more.
And just as far as the music you're making and the charts you're putting out, where can people go to find that online?
Yeah, so all my stuff is at adammeckler.com. You can buy all my charts there. I sell my big band tunes for $100 a piece, and they come in digital PDFs only.
They're worth it, people.
They're worth it.
A lot of work goes into that.
It's true, and I see a lot of people selling charts for like $30, and I keep reaching out to people going like, you shouldn't be selling it for that little. Especially we're talking like my pieces are 10, 12 minute long through composed big band charts that have personality, and people are usually coming to buy my charts because they listen to my albums and they really love it. And so, obviously it's worth that to them. Even with this new job, it's like, we need that income. My wife doesn't work. We got 2 boys. It's like I'm selling those charts and really grinding and still trying to make money as a player and as a composer. I mean, just like I was for 10 years in Minneapolis. It's not like that stuff immediately goes away or immediately. It's not like I'm immediately abandoning everything I've always kind of identified with as an artist. Mm-hmm. But I also have this wonderful thing at Michigan Tech, and I really love it. And my colleagues are amazing. My colleague right here, Mike Christensen, he's played with Maria Schneider Orchestra, and he still tours with John Hollenbeck's orchestra. He played with Fred Hirsch in New York City at Carnegie Hall like a couple of years ago. He's a world-class jazz trombonist, and he is the director of the wind ensemble here and the pep band. And his mission since the beginning has been to amplify in the band world and voices of color and LGBTQ, and he's finding all music written by those kinds of folks, and then either arranging them for wind band or adapting them or whatever he needs to do to have his ensemble play them. But he's an amazing person. Orchestra person is an amazing person. Our composition person is an amazing person. Our chair department is amazing. I mean, it's really, and our art faculty is incredible. It's really a joy to be here and to be around so many amazing people. Of course, there's always, in faculty meetings, people kind of, but it's, we've got such a great thing here. I'm really, I'm very grateful, and I'm not taking that for granted. We're constantly going, even though there's this stress of everything right now, we're still reminding ourselves that we're very lucky to be where we are.
Well, I'm super happy for you. That's awesome.
Thanks, man.
And that's very.
I feel like
to hear.
I should have asked you about what you're doing.
No,
this is like your show. But we're friends. I want to know what you're up to, man.
I'm just hanging out here doing, because I feel like I know nothing about podcasting or whatever this is. That's the podcast audio plus the video. Yep. So my identity isn't wrapped up into it. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to learn about it.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah,
why not?
It's really cool.
Go wrong? So this was super fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude. Well, thanks for taking the time out of your day to chat.
Thanks, man. See ya.